Yeah, well, I think I've just come to the conclusion that self-love is just a foreign concept to me. Welcome to another video! A while ago, I was looking in a store. I was at Target looking around. I had this weird thought as I crossed from the young adult, teen / adult section over towards like the mass market section. And I think in this moment I realized something, and it's that I have always seen these books everywhere I go. I've seen it been made fun of. I feel like in every bookstore I go they have a large extensive collection of this genre of book, and that genre is the weird smutty mom books. I'd say these books are almost infamous for what they contain. My whole life I've seen these jokes in movies and in different TV shows that like, oh, these books are real steamy, or like these books are really terribly written but everybody seems to love them, and it's like a mom genre, you know what I mean? And I don't know if you know this, but I am not a mom. So I've never read one of these books before. I did some research and I kind of looked around on Barnes & Noble just to see which types of romance cheesy mom books they had. And I found a series of 4 books, and it's called the Bad Boy series. The Bad Boy series is written by Jessica Lemon, and from my understanding, this is an anthology series covering several different bad boys and their struggle to be good and how they meet women who are going to fix them or whatever. The first book in this series is called Bringing Home the Bad Boy. Book 2, Rescuing the Bad Boy. Book 3 I think is my favorite just because, like, separated from the context of the actual book, it's called A Bad Boy for Christmas. And then the 4th book is Return of the Bad Boy. And I kind of looked at the synopsises of these different books in this series, and I found the one that interested me the most, and that was Rescuing the Bad Boy. Maybe it's because there was a dog on the cover, and that made me laugh a lot, just because I feel like, you know, there's a sexy man looking off in the distance, but then, like, that's gonna get all the moms, but then, like, what's gonna get everybody else on the world? And they put, like, a cute little dog down there. This book had over a 4-star rating, so this is mostly positive from the target audience of people that are reading it. The plot, from what I understand, is there's this bad boy named Donovan Pate, and he broke up with this girl named Sophie. They were a thing, then they had a falling out and they broke up with each other. Now the novel takes place 7 years after this event, and now the two of them are working together, and Sophie is this, you know, hard-working woman trying to succeed in her job. This guy Donovan is trying to sneak back into her life and rekindle their romance, and they're at work with each other and they can't act on their feelings. But I just want to read this and see if there's anything of substance, because I feel like a lot of time people are like, there's nothing. They're just stupid books where they have sex every 5 minutes. And if that's true, then at least we'll be able to laugh at the nasty. I'm going to try to vlog some of my first impressions, and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do a full-length review and give all of my thoughts, all of my criticisms. I just want to know what is the draw about these books, and maybe in the end we'll be able to come to a conclusion about what that draw is. So let's go! So before I get started reading, I'm gonna make some tea. Metaphorical tea and like actual tea. I bought 2 types of tea. I bought cinnamon apple spice, and I bought sleepy time detox, because if this book is as nasty as I'm predicting, I'm gonna need some detox by the end of it. So I would say one of my favorite things about this book is just the dog, honestly. Somebody at Smutty Mom HQ was like, you know what? I just feel like the hot guys aren't selling it for everybody. We gotta do something. They added a dog, and I also just think it's so comical that they added a sticker, like not even a sticker, but like plastered on the actual cover. It says, "Great low price." It was $5 for this. I feel like that's why so many like moms read these books, is because you got 5 kids, you're on a budget, and then you're like on the checkout and you're like, $5 for this? And then they get it. The reason I picked this book out of the different ones that I looked at was because the back of this one made me laugh the most. It says, "For Donovan Pate, the lake town of Evergreen Cove is a minefield of tough memories, including the day he had to let go of Sophie Martin. Years later, he still can't forget the taste of her lips and the feel of her killer curves." I just feel like if like I was in love with somebody and we had to break it off, like I feel like there would be a lot that I would miss about that person, and I just feel like the curves would be like the last thing, which I just feel like is very, very reflective of this man's intentions. I don't know why I just said that, like I'm the dad of this woman. Like, what are your intentions with Sophie Martin? Okay, so I'm on page 1. Oh no. We're already discovering Sophie Martin's body in a way I never wanted to know. Why am I going into this book as if I'm her father? I really don't know why. I just feel very protective. He said, the blood in his head rushed directly to his crotch. What the frick? Why? This is actually kind of cute, but he calls her Scampy because she was eating shrimp scampi, which sounds a little bit cheesy, but I think Scampy is a really cute name. Maybe not for like a human woman, but like maybe like a cat. Ooh, baby, you ready? You ready, baby? And then she says, baby, she could get used to that. What the frick? So far, the prologue has just been straight up nasty for the whole time, which I want to die. But after they do the nasty for the first time together, she is like, oh, I've never done that before. And then he like is screaming at her now. I'm too much of a prude to like this, I think. But anyways, and now he starts screaming at her. She's like, I don't do virgin. What the? I thought that y'all were in love. Like, I thought that that's what this book was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be like, oh man, like, we were in love for so many years and then we broke up. But like, turns out they hooked up one night and then he screamed at her after, and then that's the romance that was leading into this novel. Here's a line for you that made me laugh. His dad says, swear to God, Donnie, you're a worthless waste of space. What'd I ever to do to get a piece of crap son like you? Not to be insensitive to his past, but that dialogue just, I feel like, I don't know, it's fine. There's like this mansion that his grandparents owned or whatever, and so like he's the next to inherit it or whatever. He's a charitable king, so he doesn't want it because he doesn't like them. If even like my worst enemy gave me like a mansion, I don't even care. If you literally choked me and knocked me out, you're like, here's a mansion, I'm dead, I will take that mansion. I'll just renovate it and make it look like better, you know? Take the mansion, dude. Don't be humble, just take the money and go. So Donovan, sorry, no need to offend. He hates being called Donnie, apparently. Instead of just being a typical bad boy where it's like he does what he wants, he's just a freaking jerk. He has this mansion that he inherited after his grandmother died. And instead of just being like, yeah, my grandma died, he calls her that dead woman. I am obsessed with like how often they're like, he's just such a bad boy. For some reason, everybody in this town just seems to like come to a mutual agreement that this guy, Donovan, he is the bad boy. Was he elected? How does one receive the title of bad boy? I'm asking for a friend. Oh, I get it now. I was really confused for a while, but now I'm catching up to what's going on. The fact that it took me 35 pages to figure it out is very telling. I'll just catch you up with the plot so far. I'm on page like 35. 7 years ago, they hooked up or whatever. He got mad at her because she was a virgin, which is really cute. And they haven't talked to each other in 7 years. At her job, they were planning like this big charity event. Like this whole event gets planned, and then the grandma dies. You know, we have everything planned, we have everything ready, the event's really, really soon. And he's like, no, I am not doing that. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, doesn't really want to be part of that. I understand. But then she goes in this long thing about like how it's helping abused children and, you know, they need to raise charity for all this stuff because he's just so bad. He says, well, when you put it that way, definitely no. So this book is called Rescuing the Bad Boy, but my question is, what are we rescuing him from? Because so far he's just kind of a jerk. Like, I understand if like we're talking about like the girl being rescued, because from my understanding she's like really like emotionally damaged because of what this dude did to her and all that stuff. But like, I don't really, what is he being rescued from? Depression? But he's not even depressed, he's just a freaking jerk. Are we gonna rescue him from being a jerk, or does he get kidnapped? My favorite thing so far has probably been the fact that every character, whenever they first meet him or whenever he walks in a room, they're always like, oh, Donnie, and then every single time he's like, Donovan, my name is Donovan, do not call me Donnie, I am a bad boy. We're at the mansion or wherever the frick, I don't remember, but like there's a bunch of guys in there and they're like renovating and they're kind of moving stuff around and cleaning it up for this big event or whatever. So Sophie, our main chick woman lady, she's like, okay, so we need to keep this stuff, like make sure not to mess around with this stuff, kind of like directing them around as best she can, just because there are certain things that they're keeping for the event and, you know, the place is being renovated. And then this guy says, listen, lady, you are in the way and we have a job to do. I suggest you scuttle your sweet patoot out of the way before we run you over with the dolly. I was dying laughing at that because I was like, that's pretty cheesy, that's pretty funny. And I was like, okay, whatever. But then guess who shows up At this exact moment, Donovan appeared in the driveway, stalking towards the truck, and he did not look happy. "Tell me I didn't just hear that, Mario," he told the man. "If I even hear you refer to a single part of her body as sweet again, or if I hear you insinuate any part of her body is the pain, I will lay you out. I don't care how uneven the fight is, how much older you are than me, or that you might sue me or call the police." And then it says, "I will lay you out." What the frick? So if this guy is much older, I'm assuming like what, like 50? Like this older gentleman in his 50s is just being like, "Hey, get your patoot out of here." Obviously, he was kind of rude about it. But the fact that this guy is like, "I will fight you." Like, "I will kill you. You're gonna call the police when I'm done with you." Like, what the actual? What the? That's wild. But he's such a bad boy. I mean, I can't complain. So, turns out that the dog on the cover is actually a plot point. Wow, I can't believe it. I'm kind of down for this plot line. Like, maybe he's gonna find this dog. Maybe the dog rescues the bad boy. Aw, I'm actually kind of down for that. He said, "You found the right guy," when he's talking to the dog. Like, "You found the right person. I'm gonna take care of you," or whatever. But, like, I don't know if I see that, because for so far from what we've seen, he doesn't seem to have a ton of empathy. When she was like, "This is a charity event for abused children," he was like, "No way." Yeah, after I hear that, I especially don't want to do it. Like, he's very empathetic, very kind. He's the right guy. It's time to detox from all that nasty. Wow, what a journey that was, huh? So now that I've finished this book and I've had time to kind of settle on my thoughts for a little while, this book was really bad. But not in the way that, actually no, exactly in the way that I was expecting it was bad. But I genuinely was curious about this genre, and I feel like coming out of this, I definitely have a lot more insight about what it is about this genre, and I'm really happy about that. To summarize the story of this book, just because I feel like when I was explaining it in the earlier clips I did, I kind of was a mess that day, honestly. There's this girl named Sophie, and there's this bad boy named Donovan, and they randomly hook up one night. She is a virgin, so then when they had finished doing the nasty, he screamed at her and then he ran off and she slapped him and whatever the frick. And now 7 years later, Sophie is hosting this event at this older woman's house, and this older woman, she passes away. It's this big charity event, and now that she's passed away, the mansion that it was going to be held at is inherited to Donovan. And he's like going to sell the place, but they're going to have to host the event first, so they're like renovating / preparing for the event and getting spaces ready and trying to figure all of that out. So because they're working on this house together, Donovan and Sophie, they are like together a lot, and over their time together and renovating and whatever the frick, they kind of fall in love. And that's kind of the basis to get into it. That's sort of all there is. I mean, there's obviously other scenes and more stuff that we're gonna get into, but I would say my favorite thing about this book, and I think one of the reasons why so many people are probably a big fan of these books, is because the writing was actually kind of bearable. I feel like normally I read books for videos and the writing is really bad and it's easy to make fun of, and I mean, there are a lot of things that aren't that great, which we'll get to, but I feel like this book was actually really easy to get through. The writing style made sense, it flowed very well. I never had to backtrack and try to figure out what you were talking about. I always had an actual idea of what was going on, and that was actually like a really enjoyable thing. I feel like sometimes when I read a bad book, the writing is not the strong suit, where I'm having a hard time picturing different settings or trying to figure out what's actually going on. There are some points where I actually looked forward to the next chapter, where I would like finish a chapter and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna be done, but then I'd be like, but what about the next chapter? Which is freaking weird, because this is what the book looked like, and the fact that I was thinking that, what the frick? But I gotta say, the characters in this book were a complete mess. I'm talking like the complete mess where they just change motives and change personality in like every other scene. There are some scenes where Donovan is like super rude and edgy, and then other scenes where he's very kind and genuine. And instead of it feeling like character development or as if he's like wearing a mask in front of other people, it's just conveyed as like terrible storytelling where these characters have nothing about them that matters besides the fact that they're hot, and we're just gonna change who they are for every scene because it doesn't really matter. An example of this is when Sophie first like approaches Donovan after the grandma dies, and it's like his house or whatever the frick, and she just tells him, she's like, yo, this is an event for abused children, and he just screams at her and it's like, no, I'm not doing this, like I don't care that they're abused children, like heck no. And then like 5 or 10 pages later in the next scene, he's casually like, we need to do this, like, for the children of this town, they deserve it. And we never see from his POV him making a change in his opinion. We never see him like growing from what he had said. We never see any of that. We just see him be rude in this scene and then see him be nice in this scene, and there is no explanation. I still don't know what happened. And we even could have had a scene in his house where he's like thinking about what he had done and feeling sorry, and then going and that next scene happening, but no, he just changes his mind. I don't know why. In some scenes, Sophie would be like, I don't need a man, like I am never gonna give myself to a man, and then the next scene they would hook up again, and you're like, what? Which one is it, Sophie? And there are tons of different side characters that just kind of like come into the story and do nothing, and that's just all they do. There are so many side characters that would just be in one scene and then we would never see them again, and I was like, why did we put them in? Why are they here? And I just gotta say, the worst thing about this book for sure is the dialogue. More like I wanna die a log, if you know what I'm saying. There are like actual complete exchanges of dialogue where Sophie will ask a question and then Donovan will answer with one word, and then she will try to carry on the conversation and he responds with one word. Paragraphs and paragraphs of just him being like, yeah, no. I feel like a lot of times in dialogue you get a really good understanding of like who the characters are, how they speak. Here we don't see that at all. There's no depth or anything to do with the dialogue. I would say another thing that I was like actually a big fan of in this book was Sophie and her job. It actually showed you her at work, her problem solving, trying to figure things out, and that was actually kind of enjoyable to see. And we actually see her life outside of a romantic relationship, which I thought was really well done. The funny thing is that Sophie is this cool girl all about her job, right? Then there's Donovan. Donovan is the type of person, like the person that we all know, that like rich white kid in high school. His parents are like doctors or lawyers or something, so they like have a lot of money. This kid posts all these pictures of him like wearing nice designer clothes and like wearing name brand stuff and whatever, and he's like on that grind, but like it's ironic because this kid doesn't have a job and has never worked a day in his life. He was just born into a rich family. That's Donovan. So we open up on chapter 1 after our prologue, and my heart dropped during this first scene. We open up and it's on Donovan 7 years later, right? And he's screaming. He's like, come on, Trixie! And he's like, he's punching, and I'm like, oh, poor Trixie, right? I thought that this was gonna open, he was gonna be abusing this woman, or like, you know, hooking up with some other woman and he's like abusing her. I was like, oh no, I'm about to just delete this video because I don't want this to be a video like that, you know? Then we just find out that Trixie is his car. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, that's for sure. So later on, when they're having their exchange where she's trying to get him to agree to do the event at the mansion or whatever, she's like describing him or whatever, and this is my favorite part ever. She says, he didn't budge, forcing her to walk across the room. When she did, she became aware of how solid he was. What does solid even mean? Like he's just built very like... Or is that a sex thing? It's hard to tell. She wasn't the naive girl she was back then, was she? No longer was she the girl hell-bent on losing her virginity, the baddest boy in town. I had a couple of moments while reading where my life just flashed before my eyes. Where like he would do something where I thought it was gonna be a situation where he was gonna like lay her out or something. One of these scenes is when he just comes up on her and grabs her. Donovan's hands tighten around her upper arms. She's saying like, let go of me, and he's grabbing onto her, and then he's like, this conversation is over, and he storms out, and it's like, what? Maybe I'm just not oriented like this. What is so cute in these books that I read where it's like a cute thing that he like, you know? Why did I do that? Now I have to reset all this up. Just kidding, I'm not like a camera person. I'm probably just gonna leave it. So there's some weird friggin' side character or whatever the frick. His name is Connor. He's another bad boy. He doesn't actually add anything to the story, he's just kind of there, but she had no idea what he actually knew about her and Donovan. Not that there was much to know anyway. They'd wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and that had been the end of things. This book is weird because sometimes it'll describe like nasty sex stuff, and it will like describe it like almost as if you're talking to like a kid or like a middle schooler or something, where it's like, we wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and it's like, oh, okay, what the frick? And other times it's just like, he shot, and it's like, what the? How come in this scene he was all polite about it, and then the other ones they're just like, ooh. So the first time that they ever hooked up, they hooked up in the library that he has. And he like casually mentions like the freaking library or something when they're talking and they're in the house. And then she says, "Don't you mean..." I can't even say it. "Don't you mean the deflowering room?" I don't know why, but I just feel like this is like an episode of Full House. Like, I don't know why. There's one scene and there's this chick named Ruby. I don't know anything about her. She just kind of exists in some scenes and then will just never ever be around ever again. So Sophie is introducing Ruby, some random woman, to Donovan. And Ruby says, "Your grandmother mentioned you several times. It's an amazing honor to meet the grandson she was so overwhelmingly proud of." Which is really cute. Even though he called her that dead woman in scenes earlier, but I mean, I'm just gonna ignore that because he's a bad boy, what can I say? Obviously, Donovan is just a rogue cannon. In some scenes, he's roasting old men for, like, saying something mildly rude to her. And then in other scenes, he's like, "For the children!" And it's just like, okay. And so, Sophie, after this lady says this, she's like, "Oh no, please, please say something nice." Which I just feel like is really telling of this guy, right? "Thank you. It's a worthy institution you run, and I'd be honored to be a part of it." What? Where did that come from? So Sophie is at his house. I think this is before they hook up again. There's a distinct point where they decide to hook up again, and then every chapter following is the exact same scene. It's nasty every single time, and I wanted to die. But this is before they've decided to spice up the mansion, if you know what I'm saying. Sophie says, "Is that a dog? A wet dog? I didn't know you had a dog." "I don't." "Is it friendly?" "Seems to be." "Boy or girl?" "Girl." "What's her name?" "No name. Found her out back." Like, what? This is like a whole page. Donovan is like, "She's been abused. You can tell by the way she flinches." And then Sophie starts to do her deep, dark psychiatrist analysis on what this means, and she's like, he flinched that one time." It's like so weird. Obviously, like, I'm not trying to like make light of this whole abuse subplot because I do feel like, you know, that's a really serious thing, and I'm not like joking about like people who are abused or anything, but I just feel like there's much better ways to convey that instead of being like, "This dog was abused because if you get close to it, it flinches, just like when you try to get close to the bad boy." One of my favorite things about the dog is that, like, sometimes I feel like dogs are just written as if they're aliens, which makes me laugh a lot. There's this random character, Connor, who's like a really good friend of Donovan. They're like, "Yeah, let's go get a beer or something, because they're bad boys. Where should we go?" And then he says, "Salty Dog." And then it says, "The dog barked." But like, the funny thing is the fact that in the scene before this, Donovan like officially named this stray dog Dog. He just calls her Dog with a capital D, which is really cute and just shows a lot of personality from him. And the fact that it's been like literally a day, or I'm assuming a day or two since he's found this dog. But the fact that this dog has caught on to the nickname of Dog is hilarious to me. I got a puppy back in August, and it took him like a week or two to figure out his name. It just kind of takes a while, just because I don't know. I'm not a dog, so I don't know. But it takes them a while to learn their name, just because dogs don't know English. And the fact that he just casually was like, "Let's go to Salty Dog," and the dog barks. Whoa. And then he's like, "Sorry girl, misleading name. No dogs allowed." I would be really down just for a scene where this dog grabs a beer with the boys. So at around 100 pages, we get to my favorite scene in the whole book. Make sure to strap yourself in, y'all, because I was screaming. I was laughing so hard. This was probably the scene where everything peaked with just completely terrible. Where like the dialogue was a mess, the plot was a mess, the character motives and personality and reasonings for doing things were completely out the window. Sophie, in a scene earlier, her sister, whatever the frick friend, I don't remember. Her friend sister was like, "Hey, you should go out with this random dude named Scott." So now she's on like a second date with this guy. His name is Scott Torset. He's like a lawyer. He's like, I don't know, just a bad written character. But Donovan and Connor, they show up at Salty Dog, which, believe it or not, is a very misleading name. Whoa. They noticed that Sophie was there with this random guy, Scott. At this point, all we've seen between Donovan and Sophie is like her be really hurt by what he had done to her and kind of wanting to back up. She says several times that like she doesn't have time for love, she doesn't want romance, like she's just over it. And he's like expressed like thinking she's really beautiful. He doesn't really say it quite as polite as I just did, but he expresses that like he has interest in her. That's kind of all their relationship is right now. Here we go. Scott bent his head closer to Sophie as Donovan closed in, walking calmly, trying not to appear murderous. Scott's hand traveled to Sophie's butt, this time squeezing. Okay, so he decides, I'm gonna fight this guy. Like, heck no, that's my girl that I have been really passive aggressive towards and randomly hooked up with 7 years ago and then screamed at her afterwards, how dare you? And then he's like, Donnie? He blinked a couple of times, then smiled as if he was relieved. Hey, long time no see, buddy. And then Donovan says, get the hell out of here, Scott. His smile dropped. Excuse me? You're excused. Get out! And then Scott says, you got a problem, dude? Even though she expresses consent, so like it's not that big of a deal. Like she says several times, like, we're on a date, like I'm with him, like I like him, like I want this. She says that several times, but he's still like, no you don't! I hooked up with you 7 years ago, so I clearly know you very well. And they start screaming at each other. You're about to have 5 problems. The fingers on my hand! I was actually crying at this point. Like, it is so funny. Like, what is going on? Like, it does not make sense. Why are they gonna fight? She's on a date with him. And then Scott is like, dude, you're making her uncomfortable. And then even Sophie is like, Donovan, stop. Like, she's like mad at him for doing this. So like, clearly he's crossing a boundary, unless I'm just mistaken here. He says, tell me, Scampy, the way this douche is touching you isn't making you uncomfortable, and I'll leave you two to get your drinks. Wait, what? That doesn't make sense. And then she expresses, like, several times, she's like, I'm fine, like, I'm not lying, like, I'm having a good time, like, I want this, I'm on a date with him. You're lying! You're lying! You don't like him! You're lying! Like, he's, like, actually, like, gone psychotic at this point. He's, like, telling Scott, who is on a date with Sophie, I've had her mouth on mine, and I know that she doesn't like when people touch her, because I screamed at her after we did it. She does not like to be touched, so I'm gonna escort you out. I just keep thinking that it can't get worse, but like somehow it just does every single time. Scott says, using me to get back at an ex-boyfriend? Really? I was wondering why you asked me out for coffee. And then Donovan, in this moment, is like, wait, she asked him out. They're on a date. And then Scott says, and you threatening me? You're as immature as you used to be. I'm like, what kind of scene is that? This dude is storming out and Sophie says, I'll call you. Donovan, the bad boy, he says, she won't. And then the chapter ends and he's like, I know you didn't like that. I saved you. And then it just ends. I obviously know more about you than you do, cause I slept with you 7 years ago and then screamed at you afterwards. And she says, I'll see whoever I want to see. And then he says, who do you see now? She breathed out one word. You. And then from this point, they're just together. And from this point on, and I was like 100 some pages in, and I was like, wow, there has been surprisingly not a ton of nasty, right? But then the author just did a curveball, and then the rest of the book was just straight nasty every single chapter. There is this scene where they start to make out, and there is no subtlety at all. Like, they just start going for it. Sophie's talking, and she said, Sophie was excited. Bad boy kisses did that to a girl. I honestly wish that I would have marked every time a character referred to Donovan as just bad boy, because it's so funny. Like, nobody in real life says, bad boy kisses do that to a girl. If you say that, let me know. Leave a comment. At this point, we're like 140 pages in. Dog has just been referred to as Dog with a capital D. Mostly by Donovan because he has no soul. And he's just calling her Dog, and then he's talking with Sophie or whatever, and she's like putting out names for him, just trying to, you know, refer to this dog in a kind way, like any human would. And she's like, Spot, Fluffy. And then she's like, how about we name it after the woman who last lived in this house? Gertie, because her name was Gertrude, the grandma. Here's an example of the dog acting like an alien. Dog lifted her head and looked at him, teeth still clamped around what looked like a pair of stretchy pants. Drop it, he told the dog. She wagged her tail. Left, then right. And then randomly following this, there's this scene where like it shows Donovan getting like slapped by his dad or something. And it's written in italics because it's the past. And he's bleeding. And then he's like, it's because of Dad's class ring. Do people still wear those? Sophie vowed anew she was gonna keep her heart to herself. She was done with men. 3 pages later, they're making out and they're about to hook up. This scene still doesn't make sense to me. I've read it twice now and I've just tried to figure out what's going on, but it's just hard for me to figure out. So she's like painting, because they're renovating the house, because he's gonna sell it when the event is done. She's climbing on this ladder and she's painting. She's trying to reach over to paint this like spot that's like further over in the corner of something, and then the ladder starts to wobble and she falls. And it's described, it says, the ladder tips. In my head that means she just goes straight down over this way, right? Then the scene cuts out. Now it's in Donovan's POV, and he's in the kitchen or over in the next room. He's drinking a beer because he's a bad boy. And we just get the exact same scene from his POV, except this time he sees her about to fall, and he like Twilight vampire runs over and stops her from falling. Like it says that he grabs her. Because it's weird, because in the last scene it said she falls. So did he run over and catch her mid-fall? Or did he just stop the fall from happening? This isn't Twilight, this is just a bad boy book. Is he a vampire? How did he get over there so quick? How did he catch her too? That doesn't make sense. And when she lands in his arms, he's like, wow, her butt is so good. And then Donovan starts to have a flashback. And the way that he describes this like sad, tragic moment is so funny. I was playing with my Hot Wheels. Literally, I can't make this up. He's like, I was playing with my Hot Wheels on the, you know, the little thing that she was painting on, like the little trimming, or the little like railing or whatever. Like he's like, I was playing with my Hot Wheels, and then my dad saw me, and he got mad at me. And he punched me. The abuse isn't funny, it's just the Hot Wheels. Punches him and he says, get out of here! No dinner or breakfast! You starved! And you think about what you did! What? Just because he played with his Hot Wheels? Dad? She's changed out of her clothing or whatever, and it says she's standing in her bra and only her pants. And she walks in and just flat out says, no other context or dialogue before this, she just says, do me? Instead of like flirting beforehand, she just straight out said, do me? And then they do, because maybe he's just such a bad boy. So now we're at the part where they start to hook up every single chapter, but one of the times that they're like doing the nasty or whatever, he's like, please distract me, I want to make this last longer. And she randomly starts talking about s'mores. She's like, I love s'mores. It's like, okay. But then after the fact, it's so funny because he's just like, the way she'd made s'mores sound so sexy in the wrongest way. What? And then there's another scene where they're about to do the nasty. And then he like looks at her underwear or something. He's like, white with tiny blue flowers on it. Like, okay. And then he says, I used to be a lace man, Scampy, but you make cotton sexy. You heard it here, guys. She brought cotton back. You know how last time she was just said, walked in and was like, do me? Well, there's literally another scene. And this time he walks in and he says, do me? Like, why? And then they do. They hook up again, because this book is literally only hooking up from this point. And after the fact, she just casually asked him, like, how many people have you been with since we were last together or whatever? And he's just saying, like, nope, not answering that question. Because I don't know why, because maybe he's a bad boy, I don't know. He just keeps being like, no. No, and I was just dying laughing, just because like, this is all in my head, this isn't actually translated into the book, but in my interpretation he was just like, no, 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 no. But then we later find out that he's been with nobody since, because he's a bad boy, but he has a heart of gold. There's this other scene later on where him and his friend Connor, they're like getting really, really close to the big event or whatever, the big charity event. And so they're like outside, preparing like the outside areas where things are gonna be. And then randomly they start wrestling on the ground. Like, is this how people act? Like, maybe I just don't really know. Maybe I'm just not really out here living life like this, but they're just like throwing each other to the ground and they're wrestling and they're pinning each other down. For no reason, they just decide to wrestle. Do people do that? Am I living my life wrong? His hands sliding around her butt and cupping it. Is he like... like, what is that? Cupping? Cupping? I mean, go off, I guess. Here's this scene which was like borderline rapey. He gets in bed and he says, "Get in and take off your clothes." She says, "No." One of his eyes twitched. "You get in." "You don't get in that bed, Scampy, I swear." But I can't complain. He's just such a bad boy. There's another scene where like they're about to hook up because, I mean, what's a chapter without another hookup, you know what I'm saying? But this time, they realize that they don't have protection, and they just decide to do it anyways. And I was literally like freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, like what kind of book is this? Like, and I even thought like maybe they're gonna like pull that in the end and like she was gonna be pregnant or something. But no, they just have unprotected sex and then they just kind of move on, and it's just like a cute romantic thing. Makes me uncomfortable. He says, "Being inside you is like being held together." I just imagine like that being somebody's wedding vows. Like, what the frick? Donnie, she asked, he licked his bottom lip. Is that supposed to be cute or like hot? Like, oh no, that's so nasty. I hated that. Maybe biting your bottom lip, but like ew, I hate the feeling of that so bad. This chick has an infinity sign tattoo because she's a white chick. And Donovan has a lot of tattoos, so we later find out that like his tattoos is to cover up his scars and stuff. And then later she sees that he has the exact same tattoo that she does. And he got it like after the fact, like after their time together or whatever. She just is like, "Wait, why do you have the same tattoo as me?" And he says, "You are one of my scars, Sophie." He says this several different times and it's like seen as like a romantic thing, but like how is that romantic? That's like almost a roast. All they did was hook up and then he screamed at her and then she slapped him and left. How is that like a deep emotional thing that's like carried through him after all these years? It doesn't really make sense to me, and it's just really poorly done. Continuing to roll one nipple between his fingers? How do you do that? How do you do that? Like, that's nasty. I don't want to think about it. But like, what kind of description is that? What the frick? Like I said earlier, Donovan only likes to reply with one word because he's a bad boy. Here's an exchange of dialogue. Sophie sees him working outside and she walks up and she says, "Hi." And then he goes, "Scampy, what are you doing?" she says. He looked up. "Fire pit." That's kind of it. So then they're at the event for the abused children, and you know, like two professionals, they decide to hook up secretly at the party. And it's like so creepy because there's like children like outside the room when they do it, and while they're doing it they're like, "Be quiet, there's children." Like she would like be really loud or something, and then he'd be like, "Hey, there's children out there." Like, it's just creepy and honestly gross. And we have like 50 pages until the book is over, and I'm like waiting for there to be some sort of a budding romance because all we've seen so far is them like fight, him give one answered responses, and then hooking up. And I've been waiting for there to be some sort of character development, you know, something for him to change in the end, just because I was waiting for him to get rescued because that's the book title. And so like later on they're gonna hook up again because and he takes her to the library because that's where they first hooked up for the first time. He's like, "I'm gonna give you a do-over, the first time you deserved." And it's like seen as this really romantic thing, but I just felt like there's a lot of plot holes in it because he was a jerk and he like told her like, "You're a virgin, I don't want to hook up with you." And we never really find out why he did that. Like, it's kind of said that like he didn't want to take advantage of her, but like they had already done it. She was obviously consenting and seemed to be okay with it. He was saying like, "That night that we met, like I wanted to get super drunk and then go do a bunch of dangerous stuff, and then maybe I would die because I'm a bad boy." And then in a really cute romantic way he's like, "Yeah, you're the virgin who ruined my plans. We hooked up that night and you saved me." But he screamed at her. I don't get it. And then he's like, "The reason I screamed at you was because I loved you." Which I don't think that's true. But anyway, they have this whole moment where they're like saying like, "I love you so much," right? And I was like, is this a reveal? Because y'all have slept together like literally 20 times at this point. Like, I thought that was just kind of a given thing, right? And so like they have this scene and they say they love each other, and then he's like, "Uh-oh, but I'm selling this house and I'm leaving Evergreen Cove," because there's no reason. He just apparently doesn't want to be there, but then he's also sad that he's leaving, but then he's also happy. It's terrible. Sophie's leaving and everything's kind of, you know, left on its own. He's about to move out because they're in the process of selling the house or whatever. He's all alone and Donovan says, "Yay me," he growled. And at first I read that like London Tipton, like, "Yay me," like, and I was dying laughing. But then he growled it and I was like, how do you say that? Like, "Yay me." Literally, I'm not even kidding when I say this is the beginning of the chapter. The next page from when they just said they loved each other, we have a reveal. And that reveal is Donovan loves her. Didn't we just have that reveal in the last chapter? That's why I'm confused. Like, we have this second reveal that he loves her, and he's like, "I love her. Oh no, I can't leave. I love her." It would have been different if that last scene would have just been cut. But we have a scene where he's like, "I love you. I want to be with you. But I'm moving." And then the next scene, we have a second reveal where he reveals that he loves her. Okay. And in a beautiful scene in the last 20 pages of this book, trying to clear his head from his love for her, and so he starts to walk in the different rooms of the house. And in every single room that he walks in, he says, "We hooked up in here. I can't be in here. We hooked up in here. I can't be in here." And he goes in every single room in his house. He's like, "We hooked up in here. There's too many painful memories. I can't be here." And then he calls this random guy and he's like, "I'm not selling the mansion. I love her." But like, I was like, okay, like, that's fine. It's cringy, but that's fine. And then the guy who, at this point, I'm not even kidding when I say he has not been in the book. Like, we've heard his name a couple times. He hasn't like been in any scenes. But this random guy who was like the one that was helping him sell the house, he says, "I love her." And this random dude is like, "I know." How would he know? He hasn't even been in the book at all. He's never even seen them together. What the? And he decides not to sell the house. He decides he's gonna live there and he's gonna try to be together with Sophie. And then in this next scene, like 3 pages later, he says, "I love you. I've loved you forever." Which is weird because in the last scene, he said, "I loved you." And then in the scene before that, together, the two of them said that they loved each other. This is the third scene where they've expressed that they love each other. But this is funny because he says, "I want 3 children, by the way." So in the epilogue, it's like 7 years later because, you know, in the first chapter it was 7 years ago. Now it's 7 years later. And they have 2 children together. Like, she walks in the room, he's like, "Hey, Scallop." So we have Scampy and we have Scallop, which is fine. We're not like anti-nickname, but he gave the nickname Scampy to Sophie because she was eating shrimp scampi. Was their like 5-year-old daughter eating scallops? Where did that come from? The last paragraph of the book really takes it for a curveball because I thought it was gonna end and they're like a family and he got rescued from his bad boy ways, I don't know, but no. Cassidy and Carmen Pate were born at 8:52 p.m. And I was like, aw, they had kids together. Like, that's sweet, I guess. 16 years later, his twin girls were both driving, drop dead gorgeous with long black hair, and their mother's moss green eyes. Against Donovan's will, they had permission to date. And then it says he was in big trouble. What is that? He had these 2 daughters, and they're sexy now, and they're dating men. The end. And then that was the end of the book. Literally, it ends with like a weird sexualizations of their daughters that were born like in the scene prior. Like, that is so weird. And that was Rescuing the Bad Boy by Jessica Lemon. My question going into this was, what is the draw about these books? Why do so many people love these? Are they terribly written? And I think that I can say that these are terribly written. At least this one was. The characters were super bland, but I feel like that's the draw about these books. No matter who they are, they can almost insert themselves into the role of Sophie, or they can see themselves with this bad boy. With such a bland, weird character like Sophie, so many people could relate to her and want to be her, and they can see themselves in her shoes and almost fantasize about, what if I was with a bad boy, you know? Maybe so many middle-aged people read these books just because they can insert themselves into that role. Maybe they want to read something spicy and want to like rekindle their romance or something, but I just feel like it makes sense to me now. It makes sense that so many people would want to see themselves in that role. But I totally understand why these books are considered so infamous too, because Did you hear some of that stuff? Outrageous sex scenes. Really, really, really out there dialogue. Really descriptive, nasty stuff. But I feel like they're books that are really quick to get through, and I feel like somebody that's maybe older and they just want to have a good time and they got 5 kids and you got a busy schedule and you just want to, you know, dream about a sexy bad boy. I could see somebody wanting to pick this up. You know, they're really cheap. They're only like a couple dollars and they're cringy and they're really poorly written, but I mean, who cares? I'm just here for a good time, you know? Like, I feel like everyone's just reading these for a good time, so I mean, how can I complain, right? But I think that's all of my thoughts about rescuing the bad boy. Make sure to subscribe to my channel because I post videos on Tuesday. This video was freaking long. I would say my biggest critique about this book, like, just scrap everything else I've said, but like, what does he get rescued from? I still don't know.